And Irving put it all together for me. He said, what defines academics, they're people who were born without backbones. And he was right.
In this installment of our conversation with Fred Siegel, Fred takes us back to his social democratic roots, his experiences in the 1960s, his role as an editor at Dissent and Telos magazines, and his assessment of the Frankfurt School, which remains an influential source of modern leftist thought. So Fred, do this for me. Situate yourself a bit on the ideological spectrum, how you described yourself when you were, say, 20, 25, and when and what were some of the things that began to have you make your second thoughts and change your mind about the world?
I think I think like my grandfather, I was a social democrat, and social democracy was an important strand in American liberal thinking until the end of the '60s, when it was destroyed by the New Left. And one of the ways where I sort of kind of broke with the New Left, or I'm not sure I was ever a New Leftist, but I was influenced by them, was on Vietnam. It was clear that the North Vietnamese were Stalinist thugs. I didn't think we should be in Vietnam. I thought we made a mistake. But I didn't think North Vietnam was a good society, or that the people defending the North Vietnamese I thought were just off, and got into a fair number of arguments. And then another set of arguments I got into, which influenced me, was listening to people explain to me how Nasser was a great man and was really a socialist and the vanguard. Well, my grandfather and father were both staunch supporters of Israel, and as was I. And I kept on saying to people, but wait a minute, didn't Nasser bring in all these ex-Nazis, war criminals to advance his rocket and missile program? And they would say, well, I didn't know anything about that. And that was the first clue I had that there was a kind of ideological configurations which obliterated evidence. And so, and this brings us to Yemen, which sounds like an odd thing to bring up. But Yemen in those days there was a war between supposedly North and South Yemen, actually East and West, communist and anti. I mean, Yemen is an absurd place. It's got less water than any other comparable square footage in the world, and Nasser sent his troops in there to get involved on the left wing side. I would say to people, what do you mean the left? What is that? What's that about? Explain to me how this left wing. So there are things that accrete over time. And then when I graduated from college, the person who influenced me most was Irving Howe. I became first an editor and then an executive editor of Dissent, and Irving was just a marvelous man. Even when I should point this out. This sound pretentious. Even when I changed my point of view politically, I didn't change my friends or the people I admired. So to this very day, I still have friends who have other people come up to them in the street and say, "Are you friends with Fred Siegel? How could you be friends with Fred?" And people say the same thing to me. How can you be friends with so and so? And so, but Irving was wonderful. He was at my kids' bar mitzvahs. He taught me how to write. Jan remembers the first time I wrote something for Irving in Dissent. He X'd out 70% of it. This is terrible. That's terrible. Do a complete rewrite, and I did, and I kept writing until. So even though my dissertation was published without a single comma being changed, it was boring and dull, and my parents were right, and it was unreadable. And Irving saw that I was writing in an unreadable academic style, and I also learned a lot from Irving in terms of academia. I mean. I had already seen this because my last years at the University of Pittsburgh was sort of the beginning of PC, and I saw that a lot of academics didn't have a lot of intellectual courage, and Irving put it all together for me. He said, what defines academics, they're people who were born without backbones, and he was right. I did something which many people felt was odd. I was an executive editor of Dissent, and I was an editor of the magazine Telos, the only German language publication written in English. And the editor was my friend Paul Pacone. If you go up the stairs of my house, you'll see a picture of He died tragically young. A wonderful guy and a fantastically talented guy. He could build houses with his bare hands, and he was the editor of Telos. But it was through Telos people I began reading the Frankfurt School seriously, not just excerpts and the more I read, the less I liked them, because I realized they'd gotten everything wrong. They didn't see Stalinism coming. They didn't see Hitler coming. They didn't understand what World War II was about, and they completely misunderstood America. And so I wanted to know why I was supposed to be so... And Hofstadter, to a lesser extent, and to a greater extent, Kit Lash, were just enamored of the Frankfurt School. I never got it. Some of them changed. I mean, to be fair, some of them changed their minds. Klaus Aufe, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, a German writer, did a book on what happened to the Frankfurt School people when they went back to Germany. And it turns out some of them turned out to be neo-Tocquevillians. When they weren't in America, they became Philo-American. But that wasn't the impact they had here. And so with the Frankfurt School, you could see how people could engage in gibberish, high-tone gibberish, and claim they'd explained something. There's a great line, Sidney Hook, who I'd met but didn't really know. The great line from Sidney Hook, where Sidney Hook said, "If you can show me any place where the Frankfurt School got something right, which everyone else got wrong, where they had a unique insight which allowed them to see further than other people, I want you to tell me about it." And they never did come up with it, because they never had it. In fact, they got more things wrong than your average academic. So I was very critical of the Frankfurt School.